The chamber fell into a sudden, suffocating silence. Senator John Kennedy from Louisiana had just risen to speak, his voice steady, his presence calm, yet assertive. But before he could finish his second sentence, Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, seated across the room, leaned into her microphone with a sharp edge in her tone and said, "Sit down, boy, you've had your time." Gasps rippled through the room like a sudden storm. The word boy struck like a slap, not just to Kennedy, but to the whole chamber. It was loaded, steeped in a history far deeper than politics. Some looked at Omar in disbelief, others turned their eyes toward Kennedy, unsure how the elder Southern senator would react to the public jab, delivered with surgical precision. Kennedy paused. The 72-year-old didn't flinch. He simply adjusted his glasses and looked directly at Omar, his pale blue eyes not showing anger. Not offense, but something else entirely. A mixture of sorrow and something much more powerful. Grace. "You know," he began slowly, his drawl thick with memory. "I grew up in a town so small we didn't even have streetlights. My daddy was a coal miner. He taught me two things: to work hard and never talk down to anyone, especially when they're trying to speak their truth." The room was quiet again, this time with something deeper than silence: anticipation. "I've been called names," he continued. "I've been told to sit down. But never, in all my years in this chamber, has a fellow public servant reduced debate to something so personal, so demeaning." Kennedy's voice didn't rise. He didn't yell or grandstand. But what he said next shifted the tone of the entire room, and, eventually, of an entire nation. "I'm not going to sit down. Not because I think I'm better, but because we need to learn how to stand up for respect, for dialogue, for the people who sent us here. You may disagree with me, Congresswoman Omar, and I expect you to, but don't silence me. Don't silence any of us. That's not democracy. That's just noise." There was a murmur of agreement. Even some of Omar's usual allies looked down, discomfort growing across their faces. For a brief moment, the tribalism of Washington cracked. Ilhan Omar, known for her fiery rhetoric and unwavering conviction, looked surprised. Her brow furrowed, as if realizing, perhaps for the first time, that her words, so often meant to challenge, had wounded in a way she hadn't intended. She leaned forward again, but this time, her voice was quieter. "You're right," she said. The room stunned again. That wasn't the way to speak. I let frustration cloud my judgment. The apology wasn't a full surrender. It wasn't perfect. But it was human, and that made it rare in the bitter cold of modern politics. What followed in the days ahead was something no one predicted. Clips of the exchange exploded across social media. Cable news couldn't stop replaying the moment. Kennedy stood with dignity and responded not with venom, but with humility and wisdom. The hashtag stand with respect trended for days. Commentators from both sides, even those who rarely agreed on anything, found themselves acknowledging the power of Kennedy's response. But it wasn't just the media attention that made the moment historic. Something changed inside the Capitol. In the following weeks, a bipartisan caucus formed informally at first, then with structure. Its aim was simple, but profound: to bring civility back to political discourse. Kennedy and Omar were invited to co-chair the group. To the surprise of many, Omar agreed. She admitted, in an emotional address, that the exchange had made her reflect on her own role in the toxicity of the environment. "I fight hard for what I believe," she said. "But I forgot, in that moment, that my opponents are not my enemies. And that words, when weaponized, don't build bridges, they burn them." Kennedy, with his trademark wit, smiled and replied, "Well, I always say, if you're going to burn a bridge, at least be sure you're not standing on it." The room laughed. But more than that, they listened. The work was not easy. The divide in Congress was still wide, but that single moment, a thoughtless insult, a graceful response, reminded a weary nation that politics doesn't have to be about destruction. It can be about rebuilding, healing, listening. Kennedy, long past the age when most politicians retire, became a symbol of something rare: restraint, not weakness, but strength in choosing grace over wrath. Omar, younger, and often polarizing, showed the courage to reflect and grow publicly, a risk many were unwilling to take. Their unlikely collaboration didn't solve every issue, but it did something arguably more important. It reminded Americans that the tone of our politics matters just as much as the content. That civility is not the enemy of passion. That strength is not measured by who yells the loudest, but who can rise above the noise. In the end, it wasn't the insult that defined the moment, it was the response. And in a time when America seemed on the edge of forgetting itself, that made all the difference. Final message. In a world increasingly driven by outrage and division, sometimes the most revolutionary thing you can do is listen, respond with dignity, and stand, not to overpower, but to inspire.